do strange things, don't they? We had Vacation Bible School, and I saw some very strange things happen over the course of the week. Now, I'm not going to get into any of those, but there was one moment when I was younger that really appears into my head as a strange moment. Well, it was a summer day, that was a warm day, maybe 80 degrees outside. And I was looking outside and I saw my neighbor who was on his driveway. And he had a magnifying glass. And I thought, well, that's peculiar. And he was about 4 years older than me. And so sometimes I like to see what my neighbor was doing. And so as a little curious boy, I went over to my neighbor's house and I stood over there by him. And he said, "Mike, you got to move. Get out of my light." I was really confused, and then as I looked down, I noticed what he was doing. He was focusing this magnifying glass on ants. He was frying ants on the driveway, and I thought, why are you frying ants? What is the purpose of this? Well, he liked to see kind of this destruction. He just didn't have anything else better to do, so he was going to sit and spend his day frying ants. And when I think about my neighbor frying ants, I think a little bit about Jonah's perspective. And Jonah, as we're going to see today as we conclude our series in Jonah, Jonah's on this hill to the east of Nineveh. And he's just sitting there waiting the destruction of Nineveh. And what we're going to talk about today is trying to lose this mentality that Jonah has, this frying ants mentality, so to speak. And we're going to look at 3 ways that we can try to lose this frying ants mentality. The first thing that we need to do is we need to drop the attitude. Dropping the attitude. The second thing that we need to do is to find out that we aren't supposed to be in the judgment seat, to take ourselves out of that judgment seat. And finally, we need to find ourselves a heart of compassion. Let's look at our scripture together. We're looking at Jonah chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. Hear these words from the book that we love. But Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. He prayed to the Lord, "Lord, O Lord, is this not what I said when I was still quick at home? That is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, O Lord, take my life away, for it is better for me to die than to live." But the Lord replied, "Have you any right to be angry?" Jonah went out and sat down at a place east of the city. There he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord provided a vine and made it grow over Jonah to give shade for his head to ease his discomfort, and Jonah was very happy about the vine. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm, which chewed up the vine so that it withered. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. He wanted to die, and he said, "It would be better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Do you have a right to be angry about the vine?" "I do," he said. "I am angry enough to die." But the Lord said, "You have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and as many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city?" Here ends our reading this morning. Both the hummingbird and the vulture fly over our nation's deserts. All the vultures see is the death. All they see is the decaying, and that's what they feast on. They want to find that rotting meat, and that's what they live on. They look for that, where they live on what was. Whereas the hummingbird seeks out new life. They seek out what is, and they fill themselves with freshness and with life. And yet in the desert, each one finds what they are looking for. Our first point is that we need to think about our attitude, have an attitude adjustment. Throughout the series on Jonah, we've kept a kind of close tabs on Jonah's emotions, kind of the ebb and flow that happens. The beginning, we talked about the open defiance that Jonah has. This, I am going to go to the grave because I do not want to see the city of Nineveh saved. He goes from that, keeps on with that, and so he goes to Tarshish and he's in the boat, and he'd rather see these other sailors die rather than having Nineveh be saved. And then he goes from that, he ends up in the belly of the whale, and he goes with this thankfulness mentality. He's very thankful for God. He's praising God. But then all of a sudden, when he gets out of it, he's just kind of this soldier who soldiers on, and he's just kind of doing what he says he's doing, and he's trying to get all of this happening. And so now he's absolutely frustrated again. He wants to see the destruction of the city. He's mad at God's decision to be compassionate. When I think of Jonah right now, I think of one of those cartoon characters that gets really red in the face, and then they're so mad that they have, the steam that's popping out of their ears. He's just going like this, and he is absolutely livid. But where is this anger bringing Jonah? It's doing him absolutely no good. Throughout the story, he's kind of tried to defy God. Even in the second point, he's really just kind of soldiering on, and he's not really happy with what God's doing. And he admits that in verse 2. He says, "Oh Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? This is why I'm so quickly to flee Tarshish." Remember, he's completely mad at the Ninevites. They were constantly at war with his people. He saw destruction at their hands, and so he is really upset about them. He's still harboring some major resentment, and he's greatly displeased. The Hebrew word where it says that he's greatly displeased essentially means here that Jonah treated it as an exceedingly evil to him. It was an evil wrong. It was basically a cardinal sin for him, what was happening. He was completely upset about it. But once again, this anger is getting him absolutely nowhere. We look at this as outsiders, and we're probably thinking, why doesn't he just drop this? Why doesn't he just give it up? God has kind of issued his proclamation, and God's made his decision, but why is he still dwelling on it? But then we turn it on ourselves, and all of a sudden it starts to take a little bit of shape. We can see ourselves in the area of Jonah, and this attitude, this anger, is getting him nowhere. For instance, if we say one basic sentence, the way that we say it can change it quite a bit. For instance, "Honey, would you please do this?" opposed to, "Honey, would you please do this?" It's quite different. Or, "Daddy, can I please have a cookie?" "Daddy, can I please have a cookie?" The exact same words, different attitude, different anger. That's going to change it quite a bit. But this anger, this attitude gets Jonah absolutely nowhere. And Paul hits on how we need to be builders and we need to build up people. He says in Colossians 3:12 through 14, he says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Bear with one another and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them together in perfect humility." We need to be people of kindness and humility, not what Jonah's doing. Jonah's this person of contention. He's being a person of anger, a person of bitterness, and that is getting him absolutely nowhere. God desires humility. He desires kindness. He desires love, not anger and bitterness. And all of it starts right up here in our heads. In his book on the 10 irrefutable laws of leadership, John Maxwell talks about the differences in attitude, and he uses the David and Goliath as the different attitude. He's talking about David and the Israelites. They are thinking, this Goliath character, he is so big that there's no way I'm going to be able to defeat him. Whereas as David's looking at the situation, he says, that cat's so big I can't hardly miss. It's very different in attitude, but it makes a huge difference. How often do we let our anger get the best of us? Where can our downer attitude affect those around us in ways that we don't want it to happen? Do we have a Christ-like humility with others? There was a very religious lady who was a business traveler as with her job, and so she'd fly quite often. And she was a very nervous person, a nervous Nancy as she's flying, and she'd be sitting there holding on to the sides. And one of the things that she found out calmed her very much was for her to bring her Bible with her. And so she brought her Bible, and when the plane took off, she got it out and she'd just read her Bible and wait until it was over and